All About Beer receives underwriting support from Monk's Cafe. They understand the importance of independent journalism in the beer space, and their support helps fund original work. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of everything. I'm John Hall. Harpoon Brewery celebrates 40 years in business this month. And in a moment, you'll hear a conversation between brewery co-founder Dan Kenary and All About Beer publisher Andy Crouch. But first, do you have story ideas or guest suggestions or just want to reach out? You can get me anytime on email at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. You know, I've been talking about this on the show for a while, and Andy is at the cold open of the shows, but we're able to bring original content to the beer industry and to curious beer drinkers through your support. We've created an affordable underwriting program that's easy on your budget, helps you get visibility, and is an altruistic way to directly fund writers, photographers, and editors. Journalism's under assault. You can help us out by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support to learn more. When you're at our website, poke around. You can read some of the recent articles, you can go through the archives, and you can tune into other podcasts like One Iconic Beer with Jeff Allworth, the Brewer to Brewer podcast, and the All About Beer podcast with Don Tess and M. Souter. You will not be disappointed. We're also on social media at All About Beer, and you can follow us to keep up with everything else we have going on. Andy's conversation with Dan is in a moment, but first, here is a word from this episode's sponsors.
Today's brewers need hops that perform consistently, from pilot scale to full production. Lupocore was engineered to meet that challenge, delivering enhanced sensory performance, reliable dosing, and scalable brewing efficiency in an easy-to-use T90 format. Backed by Haas innovation and sensory expertise, Lupocore helps breweries create impactful hop character with confidence and control. Reach out to your Haas Sales Representative or visit lupohops.com for more information.
Hi, this is Tim Shasha from Berkeley Yeast. Our mission is to give brewers better tools that are affordable and easy to use. Our team has been developing Tropics yeast for nearly 10 years, and we just launched it in a dried format. This is a yeast strain with high thiol biotransformation activity, which means it's great for making tropical forward hazy IPAs. I'll tell you more about how it works later in the show, or you can check the show notes for our recent article called All About Thiols.
As per usual, Andy does a great job setting up his interviews, so I'll let him do the honors. Recorded last week at the Harpoon Brewery taproom in Boston, here's Mr. Crouch interviewing Dan Kenary.
Welcome to the Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast. I'm your host, Andy Crouch, the publisher of All About Beer magazine. Today we're coming to you live from the Harpoon Brewery here in lovely downtown Boston, Massachusetts, right in the middle of the World Cup and just minutes after the USA game finished. Congrats, USA, on the win. And before Scotland takes on Morocco down at Gillette, Boston Stadium. We're all gathered today to celebrate the 40th birthday of Boston's beloved Harpoon Brewery. And we have our guest for the next 45 minutes, Harpoon's co-founder, Dan Kenary. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you, Andy. And welcome to Harpoon.
It's my first time here, never been, so not untrue. I actually had a book release event here 20 years ago, and that's how long ago it has been, but this brewery has been open a while. But with the release of Harpoon Ale in June of 1987, you and your partner at the time, Rich Doyle, and George Ligeti.
Yeah.
What happened to George? What's the story with George?
Great guy. He left in 1990, so he was only here a short time.
Because I never met George, so I never knew the story.
He was
of
our
George.
operations guy. He was an engineer by training.
That you guys became the first brewery or first folks to commercially brew here since, I believe, what was the close of the Haffenreffer Brewery in 64?
The first in Boston since 64, the first in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since Carling closed in Natick in 71, I think.
Yeah. So, from the start, you knew that you wanted a brick-and-mortar brewery.
We did.
You wanted, which was in contrast to some other Boston-based entities at the time. But that was a point of differentiation for you. But how did you end up choosing this facility in this place?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'll do a little detour, Andy. You're right. When we were starting, we were more of a West Coast, Pacific Northwest model. The East Coast model, there's a lot of contract brewing out here, whether it was New Amsterdam, Sam Adams, Dock Street, Old Hyrick down in D.C. It's kind of like that model, predominated on the East Coast, whereas the West Coast was all looking with disdain on contract brewers. So, we wanted to bring brewing back to Boston because we were not just about the beer. We were inspired by traveling in Europe and the beer culture that existed there that did not exist here, where you had breweries right in the center of town, beer halls, beer gardens, beer cells, bringing people together. We loved that. I'd been to a bunch of brewery tours in the U.S., and with few exceptions, you were going to an industrial park out on the interstate someplace, right? So we cared a lot about this site. It was down at this spot here, and it was not the Seaport back then, or a place down in Hyde Park, which is a relatively quiet corner of Boston. So we held out for this one. It took us an extra 6 months, which was very costly at the time, but it was one of the best decisions we ever made.
So this spot at that time did not look like it does today. I imagine it was a lot of fishing operations. It was a lot of industrial operations, mainly surface parking lots.
Surface parking lots.
And now it has become kind of the beating heart of Boston.
It's crazy. Our building was built in 1942, right after Pearl Harbor, by the Navy to build destroyers. They put them right out the other end of the harbor. And our neighbor, a 140-year-old fish processing business, family-owned. So there was nobody down here. And you're absolutely right. They were delighted when we said we'll take this space. And we loved it because of 45-foot ceilings. It was built to withstand a direct hit. And so the floors could take a ton of weight, and it just all kind of worked. And the price was right because they really wanted to get somebody in there. It's basically been empty since the Navy left.
Mm-hmm. So since that time, you have gone on to purchase Catamounts Brewery in Windsor, Vermont. You have had some other breweries that you've got involved with, but this, when you were opening Harpoon, with your partner, at the time, Rich Doyle, how did you two meet? How did you two come around to the idea that you wanted to open a brewery?
Sorry about that. Rich and I were in the same freshman dorm at college.
Okay.
So we met each other drinking beer in freshman year in college. The drinking age was 18 at the time. So the freshman class or the beer drinking parts of the class would meet at a bar called Father's Six on Thursday nights. It was dollar pitcher night.
Okay.
This was not craft beer. There was no craft beer at the time.
No.
But Rich and I, bonded over, talking about beer and sports and things like that. Although he's a diehard New York fan and I'm Boston. But really we're great pals in college. Kept in touch after college, and he was in his second year at Harvard Business School with George, our third partner. And they started to do a research project on the microbrewing industry that was getting going in the Pacific Northwest, as you well know. Pyramid, Hall's Ale, Red Hook, et cetera, obviously Sierra Nevada, and wondering, that going out drinking beer back here in Boston, wondering could we do this here. So they approached me about that and said, what do you think about taking a cut at this? So they graduated in June of 86. I left my banking job in June of 86, and we started Harpoon. On this day 40 years ago.
One somewhat famous story about the sort of Yankee ethos of this brewery relates to pens. Can you tell me that story?
Yeah, there's real value in culturally, I think, in things like this. This just kind of happened, and then as the years went on, it kind of took on more and more weight. But this is back in the 80s. We were struggling, like a lot of new businesses, and we didn't have any heat or air conditioning in our offices over there. So our lawyers, we used a law firm downtown, they said, if you want to hold some meetings, hold them in our offices. And we did, and our partner at the time, he was an associate, he would point to the supply cabinet and say, help yourself, guys, because he knew that times were tough. And so we would take pen and paper, and we always just kind of said from that point, we've not bought pens ever since. So probably for the last 38 or 39 years, we've not purchased pens. And as you well know from going to conferences all over the country, people give away pens all the time. So it became this live off the land mentality. And each month our CFO gives out the FIPA, the Finance IPA, the Increased Profits Award, to the person during the previous month who's either done something to save the most money or increase revenues the most or whatever. It's just kind of a way to remind people that, what our roots were, and to pay attention to the small things, and then the larger things should be easier.
I'm also supposed to ask you about the importance of doing business in your underwear. or specifically meeting your first banker to lend you
the
money?
first banker that loaned us money, we'd been turned down by a number of them. And I was in here working, and we'd, again, no air conditioning, right? And so I'd come back from being out in the trade. And this is back in the day when you'd wear khakis, a button down, and a tie to go put table tents out. So I had my route, because I lived downtown, and Faneuil Hall, and I'd come in here, and I'd just be sweating, paying bills or whatever. And I regularly would just strip down to my boxers, because no one was ever down here. And I hear a knock on the door, and this guy, Andy Mahoney, shows up from Baybanks. And we actually became kind of lifelong friends, lived in the same township. We always laugh about that, because, yes, they ended up being our first banker.
So as I noted earlier, this is sort of, the Seaport is now kind of the beating heart of the city, and it was definitely not at the time. How have you seen it change over the years?
Oh, I'm looking down. We're up here in the beer hall. We got a beautiful view back towards the city, and I look down
also,
there.
Congratulations! This brewery has undoubtedly the best view from a men's room of any brewery, or frankly, almost any building in America.
Thank you. Yeah. We care about those things, and so yes, our urinals have the same view that we have, looking out over the harbor and down towards the city. When I look down here, none of this, not one of these 40 buildings we're looking at was here. There was one stop sign between here and the Central Artery Highway on the other side of the bridge. And, the three things that came together for this neighborhood, and people don't talk about all three of them, I think, the way that they should, because it was a great example of public-private working, is the highway system, obviously. The building, the Ted Williams Tunnel, making the infrastructure much better. The MBTA, the new Silver Line extension out here, and cleaning up the water. I was on the board of Save the Harbor, Save the Bay for about 12 years, and treasurer, and that's an organization that really led the fight. And those of you old, I remember in 1988, George Bush made the disgusting Boston Harbor center point of his campaign. It was the dirtiest harbor in the country. Now Boston has the cleanest urban beaches in the country. So that clean water all of a sudden made this waterfront location like, holy shit, there's a major international airport across the water. Downtown, it's accessible, you're right on the water, and the area has just absolutely taken off.
When Harpoon was first starting out, how difficult was it to sell beer? Because you're looking at 1986, 1987, very different craft beer market, not even craft beer marketplace, very different beer marketplace. What were your experiences like in trying to get folks
and you'll
to
appreciate
buy?
this because you've been an educator in a way your whole life too, as far as telling stories, and it was hand-to-hand educational one-on-one combat. I'd be going into a bar and I'd talk to you and I'd bring you a sample of our beer, and I would have to spend 10 minutes with you answering like, well, what is this yuppie stuff? Well, wait a sec, I like beer, I don't like ale. Or beer's not supposed to be amber colored, it's supposed to be yellow. It's supposed to be made by Bud Miller or Coors. It was a desert. When you kind of tell, and people glaze over. They didn't like to listen to an old guy talk about this shit. But because I drove cross country my junior year, in college, and you'd go into places and you'd have, I want to try Stroh in Detroit, old style, Hams, Rainier. They were all light yellow lagers, and a bunch of them weren't even as good as a Bud Miller and Coors, but that's all you could get anywhere. I mean, this is the day where we were excited that Coors was making Killian's. You're like, is this legit? So it was one-on-one educational, try to teach people. It's like, and one thing that always people would react to when I tell them that beer has a shelf life much closer to milk than wine. People are like, wait a second, really? And I'm like, oh my gosh, beer's a perishable product, and you're getting it shipped to you from overseas. Chances are it's not going to be that fresh. So it was just, and we were all, those of us in the industry back then, we're all locked shoulder to shoulder trying to make the case for why local small batch craft beer was better than what they were paying, what they were able to buy.
I would say Harpoon has never been necessarily the flashiest brewery. It has been one that has been consistent, focused, professionally operated. I think I've often said it's not necessarily like the craft beer nerd's favorite place, but it's a place I would invest my own money in. It is a solid operation that makes good beer for good people. And whether it's branding or the fact of IPA has been so sustained for so long, What has been sort of the approach to the beers that are released, to the beers that are made here, especially in the times you went through the 90s and the 2000s, 2010s when experimentation was all of the rage, hundreds of IBUs, wasting whatever types of ingredients, just going crazy. And Harpoon sort of just stayed the course in a different way and has sustained to a point where we're now sitting here 40 years on, which is not something that almost any other brewery can say.
Well, thank you. Thank you. A lot of your kind comments in there, and that you'd invest your money here. I think one of the things that attracted the three of us to beer, and then attracted a lot of the great people we've had since that time, is nothing about pretension. It's we're never about we have an inferiority complex with wine. Let's make this way more sophisticated so people respect. We wanted people to respect beer more, but we never wanted beer to become something that was unapproachable.
Yep.
And to me, that's the beauty of the beverage. There's nothing like it in the world for bringing people together, and the simplicity of it. And it's one of the reasons I'm concerned for what the shopping experience is like today. You walk in and it's like, holy shit, you're just like overwhelmed with what's going on here. And it's become hard to buy beer.
Very hard.
So we always tried to say, let's make a great beer with the best ingredients, and let's work hard to make sure that it's being, serviced the right way, sold the right way, presented the right way. But then beyond that, let's let the consumers decide what they want to do, and let's have fun with this. Let's never take ourselves too seriously. And getting back to your, the innovation, the testing, we tried to do it. If you remember our 100 barrel series, we had a number of things where we would let our brewers just go crazy and have fun, but it never became who we were.
Right.
And then I think the market started to dictate that.
Yeah.
Because then if we ever found ourselves trying to chase, you'd be like, no, they're going to go this direct, and they've got plenty of other. At that point, tens of other, then hundreds and thousands of other breweries they could go to, and that's kind of not who we are.
Right.
We were talking earlier about ESBs,
yeah.
and one of the comments I make when you have our ale here, which is our original product, it's a lovely mild English ale.
It's a great beer.
And I think of ESBs and some of these great styles that have just been abandoned in the rush to make bigger, more bitter, whatever. And I love a lot of those beers. Don't get me wrong. But one of the things I do love about beer is we can harken back to these awesome old styles that have been around for centuries for a reason, because they're really good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we love when Harpoon Ale comes back. I've been here since 2000. I was drinking this, this beer down at Doyle's, and may it rest in peace.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm with you, sir.
Oh, that was one of the best. That was a sad loss.
Yeah, it was. Sorry, we had to take a moment for Doyle's.
Yeah. Thank goodness we sold the sevens.
And that was one of the first places that you ever sold beer, right?
Yes, the first two. Rich Doyle and I delivered on our first day to the Sevens on Beacon Hill.
May that long last forever.
We were there Tuesday night celebrating with the Sevens crew, and then Doyle's. Those are the two.
Yeah.
That was just tragic.
But Harpoon Ale is just is a classic beer. It is like the welcome embrace of an old friend whenever I get back to it. But the 100 Barrel Series, you brought that up. This was a series where Harpoon Breweries, it was a small batch, oftentimes limited edition, single batch sort of series, and each was brewed by created by an employee. And an employee had their own idea, and their own signature was on the bottle. Why was that important to Harpoon? And frankly, which one was your favorite?
Well, of course, I'm sure you know this, but I was a brewer of the Bohemian Pilsner, and then a consultant on the Big Bohemian,
Big Bo.
which is on tap now, by the way.
That's amazing.
9% Czech-style Pilsner. We just had a ton of fun with that.
Yeah.
We're letting people, so employees could come up with ideas, work with the brewer. We did a ton of collaborations. We had 25 years of our European culture trips, and we would almost always come back and do a collaboration. One thing, and we'll probably be talking about later, is we did Steve Stewart, who was a brewer. He interned with us.
Yep.
He was working at Bass, interned with us, and went and started a brewery in Edinburgh. But we did 100 barrel with him.
Yep.
And we just had a lot of fun, allowing people to kind of because we had very limited sales objectives.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what style do you want to do? Let's go up with the name. We like the beer. Let's just put out. These are bombers.
Are you saying that Triticus and a 22-ounce bomber was not a big seller?
Well, we heard, I was out in the trade Tuesday downtown with all the crazy, wonderful Scots, hearing someone talk about a party he'd been to in like early 2000s where somebody was serving pints of Leviathan.
There you go.
And he said that
Rock and
night
roll.
did not end well. It was really fun getting through it, but it did not end well.
You mentioned, we talked about the 100 Barrel Series. You mentioned the Tartan Army, and no Scotland, no party. Like we're here in downtown Boston, where it's been especially in Seaport, overtaken by the Scots. Harpoon has released a series of Scotch and Scottish style ales over the years, including Leviathan, Great Scott. Harpoon's 100 Barrel Series number 22 was the Firth of Forth.
That was Steve Stewart's beer.
That was
yes.
Steve, and this is where I wanted to go with this. Do you think it's time to bring back the Scottish ales after what you've seen this week?
I'm going to say a hearty yes. I'm in love with Scotland. I saw a great meme today. Where you've seen it before, where there's a guy walking down the street with his girlfriend on his left arm, and his girlfriend's on his right arm.
Yep.
He's turning around to look back at a woman on his his back left, and it is the guy's Boston.
Yeah.
The woman he's turning around to look at is Scotland. The woman over here is Ireland. Did you see
Yep.
that one?
Yeah, I did see that.
I mean, for those of you not in Boston this week, something actually quite profound happened. I've never
agree.
seen the city like this. I've never seen people, it's not a particularly happy city.
Yeah.
I've never seen it as happy as it's been. And the Scots have just brought a powerful, positive, joyful energy here that people are just raving about it.
We get this once a year on Marathon Monday, where
100%.
everybody
Yes, you're
supports
right.
a stranger. And that is
That's
always
right.
I'm a Midwesterner, so one of the things being here that I miss, though I am also from Chicago, so only sort of Midwestern, is is people just being kind to each other for no reason. Most of the year I don't need that, but like once a year I get my fill, my soul gets refreshed with Marathon.
Yeah, Patriots.
Now we have a whole different thing with the Scots here.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't think anyone really expected it, because we had our typical cynicism about, this is overhyped, blah, 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 blah. And then these guys showed up, and you started hearing this talk about this happening, that happening, this joy. And then the video from Fenway Park.
Yeah.
And in our industry, our wholesalers are having to add extra trucks. People are out of beer. It's
I'm
awesome.
watching brewery owners in the back, have in their minivans delivering kegs to their favorite accounts.
Thing. I hope they can kind of teach younger Americans to stop drinking all those damn stupid cocktails and RTDs and get back to beer, because that's all they're drinking.
Speaking of stupid cocktails and RTDs, Harpoon is also making RTDs and some cocktails, right? Tell me about
but they're not stupid.
Okay, you've got Crystal Light vodka refreshers, Right Coast Spirits, Island District cocktails. Tell me about these projects and what role they play in the company.
They different roles. So Crystal Light is a partnership with Kraft Heinz. They came in through an ex marketing person, and we got really kind of close with those guys. We had a lot of fun with that. And we're it's a little bit of a flyer. The product is really good if you like that kind of thing. And so and the packaging is really good. Island District came over through the merger with Finest Kind.
Yep.
And what was the third? Right Coast. And Right Coast is a JV with our great old friends Fred Matt.
Yep.
And so different flyers on that to try to see whether we can play in that world successfully or not. And we've had mixed success,
Yeah, in recent years, Mass Bay Brewing, Harpoon, has now Barrel One Collective has started to acquire other brands, and that includes some truly pioneering New England breweries. You have Smutty Nose, you have Long Trail, Wachusett, Greater Good, Otter Creek, Clown Shoes, Catamount, obviously long time ago, Wolvers, Five Boroughs, The Shed. What sort of led to the formation of Barrel One Collective, and what was the thought of taking on all of these heritage and legacy brands?
Yeah. Well, to some extent, business conditions dictate things, right? And we became an ESOP in 2014 and took on a lot of debt to do that at precisely the wrong time in our cycle. And so, you have to be creative to try to, get the resources to continue the fight. But we started back with way back in 2000 with Catamount. We go back long enough to have gone through a lot of different cycles, and people don't forget it. But the early 90s were a real strong time, and then the late 90s really leveled off, about 3 or 4 years of flat growth. And so the guys up at Steve Mason and Alan Davis at Catamount, they moved from White River Junction down to Windsor at the wrong time and built a new brewery,
Yep.
so we bought it. You
Yep.
know, so we've been opportunistic for a long time. Clown Shoes in 2017.
Yep.
If we we've always had an eye out if we like a particular brand that could fit in culturally with the business. You know, we'd talk about it. But then it really accelerated in 2022 with Long Trail.
Yep.
And I'm a very old friend of Dan Fulham, who's the owner of Long
Yep.
Trail after Andy Fearson sold it.
Yep.
And so Dan and I just got talking, and they had actually come to us in the early 2000s if we wanted an investment, and we didn't. And so they went and bought Long Trail. And so we'd always kept close about it. And so he came and said, I want out,
Yeah.
and I want to sell it to you.
Yeah.
And I know that how firm he was in that because the Finest Kind guys really, really wanted to buy that.
Yeah.
And made a play for it, and Dan said no, we wanted to do it with us. So each one, you know, has a different objective for us in a way. You know, as we've morphed over the years, you know, we want to be a major presence in the New England craft beer scene. And what the market is dictating, I think, and I'd be curious what you think, is, you know, these idea, if you remember, that you mentioned some of this, like 20 years ago, the number of SKUs we'd had under the Harpoon banner, whether it was 100 barrel series, Leviathan, seasonals, seasonal mix packs, blah, 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 blah. The market's now saying you can't do that anymore, which I think is actually okay. Because when you go from under 100 breweries when we started to over 9,000, it's a different world.
Yeah.
So the market's going to say, like, you know what? There's a place here for Long Trail Ale. There's a place for Wachusett Blueberry. There's a place for Harpoon IPA. There, you know, and on Shed Mountain Ale, etc. There are places for these individual brands because these brands, Harpoon means IPA.
Yep.
So the market's kind of dictating that, and so we're in some ways following that.
Yep.
We're trying to follow it in a thoughtful way with some real legacy brands that we think deserve to have that place in the cooler, in the crazy crowded cooler.
How does Harpoon maintain, with all of these brands, maintain, I mean, I guess relevance, especially with it's got this mosaic of different brands, so many heritage brands that may not play as cool to younger audiences whose parents grew up drinking Long Trail and Old Brown Dog, as I did? Or does, like, relevance even matter? Is it trying to find, like you said, there are 9,000 breweries at this point. Each of them, you know, especially so many of them, 80, 90% of them, don't really distribute outside their four walls. When you get into the marketplace, maybe it's a different situation, but how do you maintain the relevance in the marketplace?
It's a great question, and I especially for legacy brands like ours that have been, you don't want to become your dad's beer, and in some ways we have become the dad's beer. Which, you know what, you are who you are,
right?
And trying to be something different is not ever successful, in my opinion, right? So staying true to yourself, continuing to make great product, and updating it and refreshing it. I think you try to refresh your messaging so that you stay relevant. Like we've pivoted to this First or Forever campaign that is really trying to just highlight, you know, all the firsts that we've had here at Harpoon, whether the first brewery in Massachusetts and Boston, obviously, first IPA east of the Pacific Northwest in '93, first seasonal beer east of wherever, anytime in 1988 with Winter Warmer, first wheat beer in the market, blah, 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 blah. We have a long list of things that we've done that we're very proud of, but they're ancient history to some extent. So you got to keep updating them and talking to people about that. And I think one opportunity we have, Andy, is the hospitality world. And that's obviously very different in the last 10 years. We have 9 places now.
Yes.
So you can we bring Harpoon to life here in Boston, Windsor, Vermont, Manchester. We just opened a new place a year ago, and the Uncommon space with Emerson College on the Common. So 4 places for people to actually come and touch and feel Harpoon. Wachusett has Westminster, Mass, and Worcester. Greater Good has Worcester. Smutty has Hampton. So, Long Trail has Bridgewater. Yep. And they all look pretty damn different. And I think that's a way that you can try to get at that relevance point. Like, I was in Long Trail for National Trail Day last weekend, and it's completely different than here, you know? But great question. And you can't become, we can never become like a warehouse of brands.
Right,
the idea that, we're just going to kind of grab these and kind of milk them like Pabst and Falstaff. Well, we just
Right.
saw Schlitz the
and
last
then
time.
eventually they're just like they take it out of
They do.
out of the lineup,
They-
and then 5 years later they add it back in. It's almost
Yep.
like a
Yep.
like a rotational lottery that they perform.
And I
with
think
their-
again, having a home for these products is really important to us.
Yeah.
Like we have a home for Wachusett and Westminster. Long Trail has a home in Bridgewater.
Yeah.
Smutty has a home in Hampton, etc. You have to have a home.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be physical,
Right.
but there's got to be something that represents that brand that's just different than let's
Right.
just throw another
Yep.
label on
Yep.
it.
Harpoon has been a leader in the lower alcohol beer space, which is a challenging area. I'm not clear whether or not consumers really care about it or not. I personally care about it quite a bit. One of my favorite beers that Harpoon does is Rec League, and it always has been. Like, I think it's a fun brand, and I think originally it came out at 3.8, and now I think it's 4
Yeah.
point. But you also have other beers like Low Key, which is 3.3.
Yeah.
This is very unusual for. I mean, I don't even know any larger breweries that have breweries of your size that have this beer. These sort of beers available, whereas like a lot of European breweries do. Why is it important to operate in that space? And do you think there actually is a market for these lower alcohol beers?
We do. Listen, we're not going to be able to build this ourselves. This is going to have to be something we do together in the brewing industry, right? We want to bring more people back to beer, and we're facing a lot of different headwinds here together. One of them is a health issue, which people, the New York Times, among them, leading the charge. No alcohol is good for you, which I think is bullshit. And beer is the healthiest choice in alcohol. And so if you have a product that's 3.3, I challenge somebody to get in trouble drinking a lot of 3.3s. I don't know if you've tried the Low Key.
You got to work really hard. I grew up in the Midwest, so we're used to like the 3.2,
3.2, right?
3.2 in the convenience stores, and like. You had to put in so much work
There was a wisdom that
get anywhere.
I told my kids going off to college that to please stick with light beer.
Yeah.
And we didn't even make one.
Yep.
But I'm like, if you're going to learn and start experimenting with drinking or playing beer pong or whatever you're doing, do it with light beer. So we do believe in the category. I think it's an interesting, this age where everyone says that they care a great deal about what they're putting in their body, et cetera, et cetera. The beers in front of us that we're looking at, which are beautiful in the sunlight, by the way.
They are great.
We know exactly what's in here. Mm-hmm. It's 4 things, and that's it.
Yep.
You pour an RTD into a glass that's mixed up in a lab someplace, and the only farm fresh products there from the Garden State, some like chemistry plant down in New Jersey. But no one seems to care. But I think I think this has been a loss for all of us since the Bushes sold ABI, because they actually really cared about beer.
They did.
And they promoted beer, and we somehow as an industry have got to get back very proudly to talking that we make really one of the greatest beverages in the world.
This is an industry where hazy IPA, really like New England style IPA, however you want to put it, really took over a decade or more ago now. Harpoon IPA I remember being here in 2005 interviewing Rich and you for a book I wrote at the time, The Great Good Beer Guide to New England, and him talking, asking questions about craft, beer fans, beer nerds think that Harpoon beers are too weak and not hoppy enough and what have you. And then we seem to have gone around the other side of the moon on this one, where those beers are now very soft, the prevalent beers in IPA, very soft, very sweet in New England style IPAs, not bitter at all. And Harpoon IPA is weirdly bitter now again. How do you think about that in terms of that's such a mind freak of how things have gone.
Yeah.
Whereas I whenever I see, Harpoon IPA has always had incredible branding. Those colors are vibrant. In a can, whenever I am at at a house party or in somebody's backyard and a cooler opens and there's Harpoon IPA, it's always going to be fresh and tasty, and it's a really nice beer for that. And it's got a nice malt balance, a nice hop balance. That's so missing from the IPA experience nowadays. How is that how is riding? I know that there are hazy IPAs that are made in this building and have been historically, but how have you ridden that wave from the original IPA brewery in
93, summer seasonal in 93, yeah.
Well, with Todd Mott to today.
Yeah, Todd Mott, yep. Yeah, it's been, and let me just say, I love hazy New England IPAs. I drink a lot of them. I drink a lot of ours. I'll drink them if I'm traveling and can't get our stuff. I think it's a delicious beer. I'm not so much a fan of the West Coast IPAs because I just find them hop bombs and it almost so dominates.
Yep.
But I get why people love them. It's interesting, when we came out with Harpoon IPA, Andy, we got so much pushback from people that it was just too bitter.
Yeah.
But people's palates change. They become educated. Like, craft beer wouldn't exist if people's palates had stayed the way they were in 1980. So you see stuff kind of coming around, but there's a burnout that I think has happened with people with these huge IPAs. And also the alcohol content is another one that some people pay attention to. And Harpoon IPA, I was talking to some of our Scottish friends, about our approach to IPAs, because they've come here and they're obviously from the land that created the style. We simply, Todd Mott and my partner Rich drove this, and we took the classic recipe for making an IPA and we just adopted it for American ingredients, fresher, Cascade hops, etc. But we were respectful of, if you will, of the actual style as it had been created, and it's a beautiful, beautiful style because I love pale ales as well. It's like a pale ale on steroids to some extent, but you can taste the malt. You can and you can actually kind of sense the yeast in this beer as well.
100%.
And so
it is a strong yeast-driven product.
That's right.
And same thing with ale.
The ale. Oh,
ale is like that. I mean, like I moved here in 2000. And I moved here from the Midwest, and I found a lot of the beer here to be very similar. Whether it was Long Trail Ale or Ipswich Ale, it was like this reddish English.
A lot of the Ringwood.
Yes, a lot of Ringwood, a lot of English style flavors to it. And it's still to this day are very yeast-driven beers.
Yeah.
For some
we
reason.
really, our roots, I would say, are a combination of Pacific Northwest and the UK.
Yep.
I just, as far as when we're thinking about our brewing traditions, it would be because our early years, we would go to Portland, we'd go to Seattle because that was the only place in the country where people were actually making beer.
Yep.
Besides, of course, Ken in Northern California.
We have IPA.
By the way, I wanted to say that my wife from Chicago, and it took her 7 years to feel comfortable in New England. I'm not sure and then what really made it for her was when a grade school classmate moved in next door, and she said, finally I have I can drop in, because you New Englanders, you can't drop in New England to people.
No,
you gotta have a reason.
When we Midwesterners find ourselves around the company of other Midwesterners, we latch onto them very hard, whether it's somebody from Wisconsin or Michigan, maybe even Ohio or Indiana, less
maybe,
so.
yeah.
But Minnesotans, we're very happy to hang out with them. But I also Chicagoans are also a little standoffish, but also it works okay here. But Harpoon IPA, as you said, started as summer seasonal in '93. That beer has endured to this day. There are not a lot of breweries in this country that have stayed, especially of Harpoon size, that have stayed with one flagship for that long. In fact, you for a long time we would say it was either Boston beer with Boston Lager or Sierra Nevada with Pale, but you can't even really say that about either of those two breweries now. How has this beer endured for so long, and how have you not pivoted to hazy IPA or other things that would have been more convenient, or this beer has endured? Why?
Well, part of it's luck. We happen to choose the most successful style in craft before anybody else.
Yeah.
You could go back. We had a 15-year run, probably from mid-90s through 2010 plus, where all you had to do in Boston, you ordered an IPA, was you'd get Harpoon.
Yep.
That was it.
Everywhere.
It was IPA. It was Harpoon, and so we had that run here, and we ended up choosing the style that everybody ended up coming to, and the craft consumer drove everything to. Again, I get back to the classic nature of this beer. It is it checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. If it's 6% alcohol, so it's on the higher side, but it's not 8%, right? You can get a fresh Cascade hop flavor, some nice bitterness to it, but it's balanced. So we always, when we're doing tastings, we talk about, do you want to have that second or third pint?
Yeah.
And that's important to us. Because again, we're about kind of people gathering around a table for an extended period of time, not being one and done. Or we used to talk about this back in the day when the craft beer nerds are really kind of taking over things for a few years. We were not interested about being in our mom's basement, having one beer and sharing that information on social media. It really was always more about the scene you're seeing here in the beer hall, and IPA lends itself to that.
Harpoon is here at 40 years. What do you see as the future of this brewery? What do you see as the future of, does Barrel One Collective look to add brands at this point? Is it only New England brands? You want to expand beyond that? Where you've been at this a long time. Like, what do you? And then I'll ask what you want for yourself in the beer industry. Like, you've seen so much, but what for Harpoon in the next?
We have a great group of people here, and it all goes back to the people at the end of the day, right? And so I'm excited about what we can accomplish together with this platform that we have now in the Northeast, where the legacy and innovation is kind of the tagline we use to describe the company. And we're celebrating and these wonderful legacy brands, but we're open to kind of the new all the time. So I don't think we're looking to expand much beyond the Northeast. We love our New England, New York footprint. Are we open to having conversations with people in this market who might want to join? We are. Are we actively looking at anything right now? We're not. So excited about it. I think craft, we're going to have to get to this new normal. We talked briefly a little while ago about the shopping experience. It's miserable.
Yeah.
It's miserable. And I don't know necessarily how that's fixed.
Yeah.
But we somehow have to get back, and I don't even want to get into the amount of old beer on the shelves. That's a whole nother part of this where we're doing a disservice to the consumer. But we somehow have to make shopping for beer easier and more enjoyable again. Personally, I'm loving it. I turned 65 last summer. We have an incredible CEO, Nathaniel Davis. I'm trying to work only 4 days a week.
Okay.
And spend a little bit more time enjoying my family. Now this summer we're going from 3 to 6 grandkids. And we have a house in Vermont. And so I'm very blessed and I'm able to enjoy a lot of different things.
Dan, it has been a great pleasure to be here. And like I said, I've covered this brewery for 25 years now. I've seen it grow. I've seen the building change and iterate and everything, and Boston's scene iterate. I'm very excited to see where things go for Harpoon over the next 10, 20 years. But congratulations to you on 40. It's really impressive. And we'll see if IPA can continue forever into the future, and we'll see if we'll survive the Scots.
See you at the 50th.
Yes.
Cheers.
My thanks to Andy and Dan and the entire Harpoon team for the hospitality and having us up there for this anniversary. Who are the brewers you want to hear from? You can drop me a line via email at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL @allaboutbeer.com. Join the This Week in Rauk Beer group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauk Beer on Instagram. Upload your photos. Join the smoky conversation. Support us by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support. And go to the website, allaboutbeer.com, where you can read new articles as well as the archives and find the links to follow us on social media. Before we run, here's a note from this episode's sponsors. We thank them for their support. We hope you'll give them your business.
Tim here again from Berkeley Yeast. Our Tropics yeast is based on a London ale strain, but we added a new gene to its genome that codes for a unique thiol-releasing enzyme. The enzyme converts the precursors in barley to free thiols that smell and taste like passionfruit and grapefruit. It's super clean. No off flavors like burnt rubber or other sulfurous notes, just tropical aromatics. You don't have to do anything unusual either, like mash hopping. Just pitch dry Tropics and supercharge your hazy IPA.
This episode is sponsored by John I. Haas on their new LupoCore Enhanced T90 hop pellets, engineered for peak sensory performance and ultimate peace of mind. Designed for brewers of all sizes, LupoCore delivers consistent sensory outcomes, reliable brewhouse performance, and scalable application across production volumes. Using Sensory Plus selected hops and Haas's advanced pellet processing technology, LupoCore elevates hop expression while reducing brew process loss, all without requiring brewers to change their process. contact your Haas Sales Representative or visit lupohops.com to learn more.
If you like smart audio content, a reminder that All About Beer has a separate podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer, which is now a weekly show, and the All About Beer podcast with M. Sutter and Don Tess, plus One Iconic Beer with Jeff Allworth. It's a real murderer's row over there these days. Steal This Beer, less so, has new episodes every Monday. And the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo. I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.